Welcome to another episode of the Jampack Report today for November the 18th of 2020. Of course, my name is Samuel Adams and this is a daily gaming news podcast meant to bring you the hottest news you need to know from around the industry. Hosted on YouTube and podcast services around the world 5 days a week, it is your one-stop shop for everything you need to know. So if you enjoy the show and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and keep coming back for more. But today we look forward to what the next years have to bring to the newest generation of consoles that have just launched. And when it comes to PlayStation, few games are more exciting than the new God of War, but it might not just be on PlayStation 5. God of War Ragnarok may not be a PS5 exclusive according to a recent interview with a top PlayStation executive. In an interview with Telegraph, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan was asked flat out if God of War Ragnarok will be a PS5 exclusive, replying, quote, "Sorry, I've got nothing to say about that today." Thereby, the speculation ships have launched. With God of War Ragnarok set to release sometime next year, players are naturally wondering if it will be a next-gen exclusive or will it release cross-gen on both PS4 and PS5. God of War Ragnarok was only announced during September's PS5 showcase, and it's unclear how long Sony Santa Monica has been working on the title. If it has been in production for some time, then a cross-gen release would not be all that surprising. Either way, it will still likely boast some serious upgrades from current gen to next gen with improved graphics and loading times, and should make use of the haptic feedback on the DualSense controller. With that being said, you might want to get your PS5 pre-order sorted, or of course your purchase made, as God of War Ragnarok will shine on the next-gen console. So let's talk about one little thing here, loading times. In the original God of War were non-existent. That's hilarious. The entire game is one shot and it is glorious. I love, adore, completely throw myself into God of War 2018. It is probably my favorite game of last gen. It is so good. If you have not played it, highly recommend it. It is included in the PlayStation Plus collection if you have a PlayStation 5. Just play it. It is so good. With that being said, this game is set to launch in 2021. In a world where COVID-19 goes away, that sounds nice, but I have a feeling this game will not launch in 2021. I hope that it does, but it already has a very packed year ahead of it, and of course it is the PlayStation 5. You already have Horizon Forbidden West coming out in 2021, that can be the big flagship game for the next holiday season. On top of that, there are plenty of games coming out in the spring from third parties and first parties alike. I don't know that God of War needs to come out next year, but if it does, more power to them, because I'm getting a PS5 when God of War Ragnarok comes out. That is my system seller. That is what I'm going for. And so if you look forward to the future, I think that this could be a PlayStation 5 exclusive, but I also think that it's naive to lock this down to just meaning PlayStation 4. This game could also come to PC. We talked yesterday about how DualSense support is coming to Steam in its full adaptive trigger glory, so that could be one of the situations that we see where it comes out on PlayStation 5 as a launch exclusive, and then it comes to PC in a year or two down the line, 6 months perhaps. It could also be a cross-generational game, but ultimately I would assume that means developing two different versions of the game, depending on what the hardware is capable of. On the PlayStation 5, of course, you have the features of the DualSense, you have the super fast SSD, you have the upgraded textures, upgraded frame rates, all of that good stuff. And on the PlayStation 4, you would essentially have what you had with the base PS4 versus PS4 Pro situation, where it's just a downgraded version of a still good experience. If they can do it with Miles Morales at Insomniac, I don't see why Sony Santa Monica could not parse back what they're doing with God of War. But it ultimately depends on the PS5 version of the game not being held back in any kind of way, shape, or form. As long as Sony Santa Monica can put out a product that they are proud of on any platform, then that's really what matters. As long as the game is good, then fans will play it. Now, will they use this to leverage more PlayStation 5 sales? Because at some point, you begin to release games that are just PS5 exclusives that urge players to go ahead and upgrade. They say, hey, we've been supporting the PS4 for X number of years, it's about time to move on. I know you love it, but here's where all the new experiences are. Nintendo does not still make games for the Wii. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so hopefully this will not be held back, but I doubt that it will, because God of War Ragnarok is, again, like I said, a system seller. For those that are deeply invested in gaming like myself, I'm waiting for a while because there were no launch games that really spoke to me on the PlayStation 5, but ultimately, I will gladly throw down $500 to play a new God of War, because 2018's God of War blew me away. I loved it. Deeply looking forward to Ragnarok, but ultimately that is where we are sitting right now with God of War, and supposedly the new game is going to be launching next year. Now, speaking of Norse mythology, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the series' biggest game launch in history. Valhalla is also the top-selling Ubisoft PC game ever, according to the company. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the Viking-era open-world action-adventure game, has sold through more units in its first week than any other entry in the long-running franchise. According to Ubisoft, Valhalla has had the biggest Assassin's Creed game launch in history. The game is also the biggest launch on PC for an Ubisoft game. The company said in a press release that Assassin's Creed Valhalla has become the top-selling Ubisoft PC launch ever. Ubisoft provided no metrics for how well Assassin's Creed Valhalla is doing, nor did it specify whether these impressive sales were due to digital or physical sell-through. Ubisoft shared the same sort of sentiment last year when Odyssey launched, saying that the Greek-era open-world action-adventure game outpaced Origin's first-week sales. The last game in the franchise was a big splash, however, with Assassin's Creed 3, with 3.5 million units sold in its first week. Ubisoft did promote other statistics, namely related to the player experience. Valhalla players covered over 4 million kilometers, unlocked more than 55 million buildings for their settlements, played over 3.5 million games of Orlog, the dice-rolling minigame, and won more than 1.8 million fighting contests, the Viking-style poetry slam battles against NPCs. Critical consensus of the game has been pretty favorable. We scored it an 8 out of 10, they say at GameSpot, in the reviews, saying, "It takes a little while to build momentum, but when it hits its stride, Valhalla is a confident Assassin's Creed title that takes a few narrative risks. As a whole, they pay off." I love this game. Really been enjoying it on the Xbox Series X. Now, I know that some people have been reporting some issues here and there. I know that screen tearing has been an issue for some that don't have a variable refresh rate monitor. I'm not sure that my TV does that, but I haven't noticed any screen tearing. On top of that, I haven't really had any kind of hiccups at all. It's just a really good Assassin's Creed game. And it doesn't necessarily feel like an Assassin's Creed game. It's just Valhalla. It's good. It's great. I really enjoy this title. And I do want to say that although it is a solid game, any game that comes out at the beginning of a console generation is going to sell very well on top of that. During a console launch that has notably few big launch titles on either side of the fence for Xbox or PlayStation, these big third-party games are going to sell very, very well. If you look back to the launch of the PS4 and the Xbox One, you had Assassin's Creed Black Flag as the big flagship game that came out for that year, and it of course sold very well as well, even though it was a cross-generational game, much like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, as time has gone on, gaming as a whole has grown exponentially, so it just makes sense that these records will continue to be broken time and time again, because Assassin's Creed is a huge title. It is, in a way, kind of like a Call of Duty, where this is one that has hit the mainstream. People love Assassin's Creed. And so Valhalla doing well is no surprise, and it's well deserved. It's a fun game. It is very, very good. And if you're looking for a next-gen title to play, this is one that certainly takes advantage of what the next gen has to offer, because graphically it is glorious. I've been sharing screenshots like crazy over on Twitter if you do want to check those out. But of course, with great graphics come great responsibility, and it looks like the PS5 game pricing at $70 is fair, argues the PlayStation boss. Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan has defended the company's decision to increase software prices for selected first-party PlayStation 5 games. Launch titles Demon's Souls and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales Ultimate Edition, which includes Spider-Man Remastered, both have set prices of $70. A Sony spokesperson recently pointed out that the $70 price tag was currently reserved for the company's biggest first-party PS5 titles, and a strategy, quote, reflective of the growing development resources needed for these ambitious games, end quote. Family titles such as Sackboy: A Big Adventure retail for $60. And asked by the Telegraph if he considers $70 to be a fair price for a video game, PlayStation boss Ryan said, quote, yes I do. If you measure the hours of entertainment provided by a video game, such as Demon's Souls, compared to any other form of entertainment, I think that's a very straightforward comparison to draw, end quote. A Bloomberg article recently claimed Sony considered pricing PS5 games even higher than $70, a report Ryan labeled categorically false. He also refused to confirm if future games from top PlayStation studios like Naughty Dog would carry the $70 price. Quote, "I'm not making any predictions about about anything that might or might not happen in the future," Ryan said. Other publishers have also decided to increase software prices for some of their next-gen games, including Take-Two with NBA 2K21 and Activision with Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Rival platform holder Microsoft has chosen to play its cards close to its chest when it comes to next-gen software pricing, with Xbox CFO Tim Stewart recently saying it would announce first-party Xbox Series X and S software pricing in due time. In the same Telegraph interview, Ryan predicted PS5 owners won't have to wait until the tail end of the console's lifecycle for some generation-defining games. Quote, "I think the performance of our studios on the PS4 generation was great," he said. "But it's a little acknowledged phenomenon that virtually all of the great generation-defining games that we published on PS4 came in the second half of that cycle, and that will be the case this time around." Ryan also refused to comment on whether God of War Ragnarok will be released on PS4 as well as PS5 next year, and we just discussed that in depth. $70 for a game. Let's talk about that. On the surface level, that's expensive. I understand. I'm 23 years old working my first job out of college. I have enough money to pay for that, but at the same time, 70 bones is 70 bones. That's a good chunk of change. And so if you have other things going on in your life, if you're trying to raise a family, if you're trying to go out and enjoy yourself, which you should be doing very, very carefully right now, masked up and very precaution driven, if you are trying to really save money, $70 is something that is not really that easy to come by. And if you do, that's a bit of a begrudging, okay, here you go kind of situation. Now, when it comes to Jim Ryan's point, the hours invested versus the hours the hours invested versus the price of the game. Right now, I have roughly about 10 hours into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, I paid $60 for that game, but let's say that I paid 70. 10 hours compared to 10 hours compared to $70, that's about $7 an hour. That's less than minimum wage. I'll gladly pay for that. That's basically the price of a movie. And then as time goes on and I put 25 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours, the cost value comparison just continues to rise. It's just a good deal. Gaming is still expensive, but it is one of the more affordable hobbies depending on how much time you spend with each game. Now, if you pay $70 and you spend 2 hours with a game, then no, that's not a great deal. But considering how much can be done in worlds like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, considering how much you'll be able to do in God of War Ragnarok, considering how much you will be able to do in the next Naughty Dog game, whatever that will be, the quality, the pedigree of these games, they're totally going to be worth $70. I hate that that's something I have to say because, again, $70 is expensive, and I am in a great place of luxury to be able to even afford that, especially in today's economy and in today's world situation. I understand that. But when it comes to how much value people are getting out of these games, I do understand where they're coming from. And so it looks like that is going to be the reality of the future. It should be interesting to see how Xbox compares in their approach. I feel like if $70 is the new industry standard, then there's really no reason for Xbox to not do that unless they just want to be very consumer friendly. But then when I look towards Xbox, I don't even think about buying individual games because everything they have coming out from Xbox Game Studios, I'm going to be getting on Game Pass Ultimate. And that's how a lot of people are looking at this. In fact, I think 70% of those with an Xbox Series X or an S had Game Pass. So they have a different kind of mathematical function to crunch over there. But in the world of PlayStation, it looks like they are not concerned about PS5 storage, and no one is really complaining. Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO, you guessed it, Jim Ryan claims the company has not received feedback suggesting consumers are concerned about the amount of storage space offered by PS5. The newly launched console reserves approximately 20% of its 825GB internal SSD storage for operating functions, leaving around 664GB usable for software, and some launch titles already take up a significant chunk of this. Black Ops Cold War takes up a fifth of the available space, while NBA 2K21 and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales Ultimate Edition also require over 100 gigs each. To complicate the matters, PS5 does not support expandable storage at launch for the SSD. The feature will be enabled via a future firmware update, and PS5 games can't be stored on external drives, although Sony says it's exploring ways to allow players to do so in the future. Given all of the above, the Telegraph asked PlayStation boss Ryan if PS5's available storage is a problem for consumers. Quote, "We're not hearing that," he claimed. "We'll obviously watch what happens as people unbox their PlayStations and start to use them. We think we'll be okay. We obviously are able to monitor hard drive usage on the PS4 microscopically, and everything we saw there indicates that we should be fine." PS5 does offer players more flexibility in how they manage their storage on their console, with users able to configure installations for some games and choose to install a game's multiplayer component or delete the single-player campaign once completed. And PS5 owners will eventually be able to expand their internal storage with Sony-certified off-the-shelf SSDs. However, drives capable of PS5's huge bandwidth will likely be expensive in the short term. As Digital Foundry's Rich Ledbetter explained earlier this year, in the short term at least, the advice is simple. Don't buy an NVMe drive without Sony validation if you plan to use it in a PS5. Also remember that extreme bandwidth PCIe 4.0 NVMe drives are likely to be very expensive in the short term at least. This is cutting-edge technology after all. Obviously though, the outlook should improve significantly as the next generation progresses, and prices do tend to drop significantly over time. The PS5 does support USB external storage, enabling users to play PS4 titles not stored on their next-gen console. And of course, we talked more about everything else in that Telegraph interview that was worth noting. But it looks like Sony is not hearing any complaints about the PS5's storage size. Understandably so, because a lot of people aren't going to be filling that up on day one. But as time goes on, that might become a bigger problem, and that goes for the Xbox as well, especially the Series S, which has under 400 gigabytes of usable storage space. That's not a lot. And so as the generation goes on, storage will inevitably get cheaper just because, again, it is technology that is evolving, and as they do more R&D, the prices will drop. And so I think that whenever that does happen in 2 years' time, you are going to be able to get a relatively affordable SSD to upgrade your Xbox Series X or your PlayStation 5, whichever one you might have. It's not going to be totally out of your reach. And even looking to the $229 1TB expansion cards that are on the Series X and S right now, there are third parties that are going to come in. There are third parties that are going to lower that price. And so I don't think it's going to be too difficult to get a bit of a new memory card or to upgrade your SSD in the long term. But that rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. If you enjoyed today's show, I hope you drop me a like down below and let me know what you think about everything we talked about here today. But do you think God of War Ragnarok is going to be a PlayStation 5 exclusive? Do you think it's going to be cross-gen, or do you think it's going to come to PC as well? Would love to hear what you have to say. But until tomorrow, you guys have a fantastic rest of your night. I'll talk to you soon, and peace.